Chapter 367. Right now, it was a relatively lively road. Since the woman started to block the road, there were many people who stopped in their tracks, with a strange excitement and agitation. After all, as ordinary people, they had a strong curiosity about all kinds of gossip about people of different social classes. This would often become a topic for them to talk about. Perhaps at some point, their saliva would splatter everywhere. But because there were guards opening the way, those people did not dare to get too close. After learning from some insiders that this was Jin Wang's carriage, many people's hearts were filled with fear. It was enough to see that Jin Wang's prestige was very popular among the common people. However, today, Jin Wang Fei was returning to her maternal home. Jin Wang might not be in the carriage, but Jin Wang Fei would definitely be there. Inexplicably, some people became excited again, as if they were injected with chicken blood. What fear was temporarily thrown to the side? There were only two words floating in their minds: big show. It could be said to be calling for thousands of times. Of course, they only dared to say it in their hearts. The curtain of the carriage was finally lifted. These ordinary people had never seen Jin Wang Fei before. But, looking at this imposing manner, she should undoubtedly be Jin Wang Fei. Not to mention other things, just seeing the true face of a Jin Wang Fei was enough to show off for a while. She was beautiful and was different from them. She looked gentle and soft, kind and amiable. This kind of woman, as long as it was a man, they would be willing to take good care of her. They only dared to think about it and would never have any blasphemous thoughts. But, how would Jin Wang Fei deal with this matter? They were afraid that she would suffer a loss. However, when this Jin Wang Fei opened her mouth, it was completely different from what they had expected. Most people's hearts were only left with astonishment, followed by fear. When Jingwan's voice fell, the people who had a good impression of her immediately changed. Vicious, femme fatale, one may know a person's face but not their heart, and so on. A dignified Jin Wang Fei unexpectedly did not have the capacity to tolerate people. She was just a woman who had once served Jin Wang. Even if she was not happy and did not want to see her, she could just send her away. But when she opened her mouth, she wanted a life and regarded a life as grass. This kind of person was in a high position, who knew how many people would die in her hands. Jin Wang Fei, woo woo woo, Jingwan had spoken, the guards naturally would not be polite. It should be known that these people, other than carrying out orders, did not have a heart of stone. Protective feelings for the fairer sex. What the hell was that? As for the beauties, Jingwan didn't give them a second glance. She still had that faint smile on her face as she glanced around. Just one glance was enough to make everyone shudder out of fear. It was as if they said another word, or even if they had any bad thoughts, she would immediately know. Then, like that woman, they would be fed to the fish in the moat. Jingwan had expected the consequences of doing such a thing in public, but it didn't matter. The man in the carriage had done many things to make her happy. In that case, why couldn't she do something to please him? But speaking of human lives, Jingwan looked back at eunuch Mu. Her meaning could not be more obvious. In the past, a certain someone didn't know what was going on with those women, but as his number one lackey, he definitely knew about this kind of thing. He even had the account book. Eunuch Mu trembled under Jingwan's gaze. Jin Wang Fei, His Highness has given this woman to. He quickly recalled in his mind. Who did he give her to? Who did he give her to? It had been a long time, and there were too many things that he had to remember. How could he remember such things? However, since the princess consort had asked, he had to think hard even if he couldn't remember. He had to remember, quickly. Although eunuch Mu remained calm, Jingwan knew that he couldn't remember it. She's not from the villa. Jin Wang Fei, no. Eunuch Mu was very sure about this. In that case, find out who he gave her to. Send her back and tell him that I'm very angry about it. Her seemingly careless tone made Eunuch Mu feel inexplicably terrified. He had an illusion that he was facing the king of hell. Was it true that one was marked by the company one kept? No. Qin Wang Fei was such a kind person. Would she become the same as His Highness in the future? Thinking of that scene, a living king of hell was enough to make people suffer. If there was a king of hell's wife, would they just kill themselves? Because it was too horrible. Muan, what are you thinking about? Or did you not hear what I said? Do you need me to repeat it? Jingwan said with a smile. Eunuch Mu only felt more chill in his heart. It was even more horrible than His Highness speaking with a cold face. Qin Wang Fei, I heard it clearly. You don't need to repeat it. Very good. Do it quickly. Jingwan stroked her sleeves indifferently, turned around, and entered the carriage. Then she saw the living king of hell, who supported his cheek with one hand and smiled extremely seductively. Jingwan felt helpless and amused. She walked up, leaned over, put her forehead against his, and whispered, Are you satisfied? Li Hongyuan reached out and put his arm around Jingwan's waist. With a little force, he pulled Jingwan into his arms. Wan, what are you saying? If someone wants your husband, shouldn't you get rid of them all under normal circumstances? But at this time, it's not a matter of whether I'm satisfied or not, but whether you're satisfied or not. Wan, you're protecting your own interests. It was not the first time that Jingwan had learned someone's virtue of pretending to be obedient after getting benefits. As long as you're happy. So Wan is not happy. You're the one who should be happier. Yes, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. It was not because she got rid of her rival in love, but because of this man. She put her arm around his neck, and the tip of her nose intimately rubbed against the tip of his nose. Then she kissed his lips without hesitation. The tip of her tongue slid open his lips, and knocked open his teeth. After being married for more than half a year, she was often pulled by someone who was good at kissing to practice. Even if Jingwan was not perfect, she was at least 70 or 80%. It was more than enough to take the initiative once in a while. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes. Although he did not know what touched his little heart, his wife was so active and enthusiastic. It was a rare benefit. How could he not enjoy it? His eyes were unusually soft. He just catered to Jingwan's movements and did not take back the initiative. However, Jingwan was still a little weak in this aspect. In the end, she was the one who was panting. The corners of her eyes were slightly red. She buried her head on Li Hongyuan's shoulder, relaxed her body softly, and calmed her breathing. Li Hongyuan's desire was obviously aroused by her, but it was not a good time to continue doing anything. Li Hongyuan stroked her back again and again. When Jingwan regained her calmness, she straightened up and looked at Li Hongyuan with a smile. Prince, there are some debts. Shouldn't we settle them? Originally, it was very hurtful to bring up old debts. Even if she was unhappy, there was no way to change the past. So, it was best to let it go. However, if she did not bring it up, the person who was carrying a debt would be unhappy. Fine, she would settle it properly. Once it was settled, it would be clear whether he would be more unhappy or not. At that time, it would be clear at a glance. Then, she would just treat it as a kind of pleasure. Oh, what does Wan want to settle with your husband? Li Hongyuan might have cared about the dark history in the past, thinking that it might not be easy to explain to his wife. But now, he couldn't be any calmer. It even became an excuse for him to trouble Jingwan. It was clearly his fault, but he was more righteous than anyone else. Come, let's talk about your 7 days of love first. What do you mean, what's the matter? It's just that. It's such a simple thing. Wan is so smart. Do you still need to explain it? Jingwan gritted her teeth. This bastard. Oh, so there's no deeper meaning. So, Yuan is not an ordinary person who likes the new and hates the old. Wan's words are wrong. Your husband has nothing to do with the phrase, like the new and hate the old. Once I've decided on someone, I'll start to like her from the new time, and then I'll continue to like her, no matter how old she is. And in my eyes, she will always be new and will never fade. Li Hongyuan held Jingwan's face with one hand, and his eyes were unusually gentle. I like the new and hate the old because, no matter if it's new or old, it can't arouse your husband's attention at all. Jingwan was almost charmed again. Bringing up old debts could make him express his loyalty in disguise. It was really enough. Ox had despised her. Then she looked at Li Hongyuan. This bastard was actually laughing. He was clearly laughing at her weak willpower and being so easily charmed by men. Jingwan opened her mouth and took a hard bite. Hiss. Li Hongyuan seemed to suck in a breath of cold air, and looked very painful. Jingwan really thought that she didn't have a sense of propriety. She quickly reached out to rub it. Pure concern made her confused. She didn't think that it wasn't the first time that she had bitten him until he bled. For example, it happened last night. In fact, it just made a beast more beastly. Could it be more serious than that? Li Hongyuan held her hand. Wan, don't rub it. He seemed to groan in pain. It's so serious. It's obviously, well, it's very serious, very serious. Li Hongyuan's eyes became more and more serene. Jingwan realized in hindsight. Her face turned red and black. Without saying anything, she continued to bite him to death. Good darling, don't bite. It's really serious. It's so serious that you can't get out of the carriage for at least 4 hours. Li Hongyuan grabbed her waist and pressed her close to him. Look at it yourself. What have you become? Good darling, you have to know that one look from you can make it react. You deliberately seduced it and didn't appease it. Aren't you trying to take your husband's life? How can this situation not be serious? If Wan moves again, your husband will think that Wan is going to appease it in the carriage. Jingwan really gritted her teeth. But when she felt the obvious hardness and faint heat, she didn't dare to move again. Although Li Hongyuan's body was a little uncomfortable, he was in a good mood. He kissed Jingwan, who was lying in his arms but was unusually obedient. Are you done with the accounts? If not, then continue. Jingwan coldly sneered. The key is not whether you care or not. The key is that the things you don't care about actually existed. Oh, this is indeed a problem. But it's already an unchangeable fact. What should we do? In addition to the ones raised in the courtyard, there are also some that were given away. In any case, they are all unwanted. If others like them, they can save some rations. Li Hongyuan's tone was as if he wasn't talking about people, or even objects. Therefore, it was good to appear in the life of the living king of hell and be chosen by him. Even if it was just a little, in any sense, it could be considered lucky. As for the rest, it was fine if they didn't have feelings for him. But if they did, then it was destined to be the greatest tragedy. Jingwan thought that she was the luckiest one out of all of them. She got his attention, got his feelings, and got his everything. However, in Li Hongyuan's heart, the luckiest one was herself. It was she who let him know that in addition to benefits, schemes, and harm, there was also warmth and selflessness. There were also things that made people sentimental. These things gave him a new lease of life. It even gave him a second chance in life, prevented the tragedy, and had no regrets. Ah Yuan, your possessiveness is so strong. How can you tolerate your beauties under other people's bodies? Li Hongyuan abruptly lowered his head and pinched Jingwan's chin, forcing her to raise her head. His eyes became unusually dangerous. Wan, do you think that in this world, as long as a woman has a bit of beauty, no matter what background or status, they can touch Ben Wang's body? Is it not so? Jingwan knew that he was angry, but she continued to stroke the tiger's whiskers, innocently blinking her eyes. According to the rumors, as long as it's a beauty, no matter if it's a good background or a lowly one, no matter if it's a pure body or a mortal body, sisters are too common, mother and daughter are the real beauties. Even if Jin Qinwang destroys a family, he still wants to get his hands on them. Li Hongyuan approached her, his warm breath brushing against her face. He gently sniffed, like the top predator, confirming the delicious food and thinking about where to start. Jingwan really had a feeling of being completely suppressed, unable to move. Then, Wan, do you think they're worthy? Worthy? His voice was soft and low, as if it was the most sincere words of love. Jingwan couldn't stop goosebumps from rising all over her body. She didn't know if it was because of fear, or because of some kind of tremor, but her head involuntarily moved back, as if she couldn't bear it, and moved her body. Unfortunately, she couldn't escape the absolute control of the King of Hell. Wan hasn't answered me yet. Are they worthy? What was called second sickness, this was it. It was clearly his own glorious deeds, and it was also his own agreement to settle accounts. Now, he didn't allow others to say it. Saying it would step on the reverse scale. Jingwan chuckled and reached out to hook his neck. Of course they're not worthy. In this world, other than me, who else can touch your body? You're mine, and you can only be mine. Whoever dares to move, whoever dares to come close, I'll take their life. As she said this, she suddenly pushed Li Hongyuan back, lifted her leg, and straddled his waist, pressing him down on the couch. Her hands were on his collar, and she slowly pulled it to both sides. She leaned over and kissed him on the lips, following the corner of his mouth, along his cheek, all the way to the side of his neck. His mental illness had acted up, and she couldn't escape no matter what. Since that was the case, she might as well do it herself. Anyway, Jingwan was also inexplicably moved. However, this smoothing action was too smooth. And it was already full of skill points. This was like the reversal of roles, and this perverted lunatic only felt abnormally happy. It was as if every pore on his body was relaxed, and his entire body was moaning inside and out. He liked to control everything about Jingwan, and vice versa, he also liked to be controlled by his true love. The most intimate contact was not only pleasurable to the body, but also to the soul. And the final result was that Jingwan delivered herself to him and was eaten clean by him. She didn't have much time to take the initiative. It wasn't that a certain someone didn't want to cooperate, but that he didn't have the ability to do so. Too extreme pleasure in a short period of time, this had never happened before. Li Hongyuan was also worried that Jingwan wouldn't be able to take it, so he restrained himself. Usually, he wouldn't go overboard, and if he did, he would at least rest for a few days. This time, he really went overboard. When Jingwan was carried down from the carriage by Li Hongyuan, the carriage had already stopped in the prince's mansion. It was very close to the main courtyard, and the horses had all been unloaded. The surroundings were also very quiet, and almost no sound could be heard. The sunset in the sky was almost dim. Jingwan was wrapped tightly in a blanket by Li Hongyuan, but his clothes were very casual. The chest area was wide open, and the marks on it were abnormally obvious. Casual, decadent, and satisfied, coupled with that incomparably handsome face, it was even more seductive than usual. Even the group of servant girls who didn't have any thoughts about him couldn't help but blush and their hearts beat faster. They all lowered their heads, not daring to look at him. Not to mention them, even the bodyguards, even the shadow guards who could be said to have severed all 7 emotions and 6 desires, seemed to be affected by the atmosphere, and were somewhat restless. Jingwan's mind was blank. Someone seemed to have not recovered from his illness yesterday, and today he came again. It seemed that his illness was getting worse and worse. Speaking of which, it was not her who made the debts, but she had lost so much. How miserable it was if she hadn't settled the accounts. Jingwan's last thought was that anyway, it was better to settle the accounts as soon as possible. As for some other things that she still wanted to ask, such as about Wan Fangfei, she had long forgotten them. The next day, Jingwan seemed to be in good spirits, but she didn't do morning exercises, which was enough to prove that she was still a little weak. After tidying up, she went to Great Elder Princess's mansion in a mighty manner. Because of her identity, she didn't wear formal clothes, but used the prince's ceremonial garb. Great Elder Princess accepted the large number of gifts from Jingwan calmly. After all, these things were nothing to her. Great Elder Princess looked at her adopted daughter, who had grown taller and more beautiful. What's more, because she was married, she had a charm that girls didn't have. She was elegant, dignified, generous, and calm. Although not every man would like this type of woman, once he liked her, it would be difficult for him to let her go. No wonder Li Hongyuan, a playboy, could be attracted to her. But at this moment, the Great Elder Princess's eyes were a little strange. Foster mother, why are you looking at me like this? Is there something on my face? Jingwan touched her face in confusion. Great Elder Princess smiled and said, I heard that you sent a person to Great Elder Princess's mansion yesterday. Jingwan instantly understood what was going on. So, that maidservant is Great Elder Princess's maid? If so, maybe I should go and have tea with Great Elder Princess. Great Elder Princess was naturally Lu Qingdi's eldest daughter, who was 2 or 3 years older than Li Hongyuan. However, because her biological mother was just a palace maid, she didn't have a high status even though she gave birth to Great Elder Princess. Her husband was also the son of an aristocratic family, but he was the kind of favored son. He was a playboy. Although he was nearly 30 years old, he didn't have a fixed character. He liked to play with cats and dogs and was lustful. Yesterday, he directly asked Li Hongyuan for the maidservant. Because the eldest princess was not favored, no one supported her. Not to mention controlling the prince consort, she was actually a punching bag. Her prince consort often said that it was because of her that his future was ruined, so it was natural that he treated her badly. In fact, he was just mud that couldn't be supported. Because he had a princess wife, he blamed everything on the eldest princess, giving him a perfect excuse to lead a drunken life. However, his family members still believed that it was true. He used Great Elder Princess's money to go to brothels and hire actresses. He used Great Elder Princess's house to raise concubines and concubines' children. Great Elder Princess emptied her private property for him, but he didn't get anything good. Jingwan knew these things before she married Li Hongyuan. She naturally hated that kind of man very much. She was also angry at Great Elder Princess. After all, Great Elder Princess was a princess. Not to mention her biological mother, half of her blood was His Majesty's blood. If she made a scene, His Majesty would not ignore it for the sake of his face. In the final analysis, she was too soft-hearted. She had someone to rely on, but she was bullied by others. However, although Great Elder Princess was her husband's sister, they were not close to each other at all. If there were no acquaintances present, Li Hongyuan might not know who Great Elder Princess was. In this case, no one would meddle in other people's business. However, maybe she could take this opportunity to teach Great Elder Princess's husband a lesson. She just couldn't stand it. Great Elder Princess was speechless. Her daughter's idea was too unusual. It had been such a short time, but she had already caused a stir in the city. She still wanted to have tea with Great Elder Princess. Do you know what kind of rumors have spread about you? Jingwan smiled indifferently. She is just a jealous woman with a vicious heart. To be more serious, she doesn't deserve to be a royal wife. Before I left the capital for Jiangnan, there were already such signs. Isn't it enough? People say that you are clever, but I think you are heartless. Great Elder Princess was a little exasperated. Besides, since you know the consequences, why did you do it? You are just a bitch. There are many ways to deal with you. Why did you do it in public? You even said that you would throw away the moat. Aren't you deliberately exposing yourself to gossip? How could you do such a stupid thing? Foster mother, don't worry. It doesn't matter. No matter what others say, as long as Prince doesn't say anything, no one can do anything to me. After all, even if it was the emperor, it seems that he wouldn't dare to gamble on whether or not he could find a daughter-in-law who matches Jin Qinhuang's 8 characters. Besides, our Wang Ye is just an idle person, so what if his Wang Fei's moral character is lacking? Jingwan really didn't care about reputation. With her husband's support, she didn't have to worry about the emperor at all. As for why I did it. Foster mother, I was forced to do it. Do you believe it? She showed a little grievance. Great Elder Princess didn't even care about her manners and directly rolled her eyes at her. It showed what Great Elder Princess was thinking. Jingwan sighed in her heart. It was obvious that she was telling the truth, but why didn't anyone believe her? If she hadn't been forced, she wouldn't have taken Prince Jin's life in that case without caring about reputation. Alright, I can't be bothered to explain it to you. It's fine as long as you know what you're doing. However, allow me to remind you that you shouldn't go overboard. Hong Yuan hasn't said anything yet, and that's because he still treats you well. However, if he were to change his mind in the future, everything that you've done today would be a huge mistake. By then, you'll be the one to suffer. Thank you, foster mother. I know. Don't go too far. The worst was still to come. Jingwan wiped her tears for herself. Jingwan couldn't be 100% sure that Li Hongyuan wouldn't change his mind, but it was really unnecessary to worry about it in the future. It was purely asking for trouble. She just needed to believe in him now. In addition, this matter spread too quickly. If no one added fuel to the fire, it wouldn't be like this. I even suspect that there was someone deliberately plotting this. Otherwise, it's one thing for a lowly servant to be shameless, but how could she have the guts to do such a thing that would make her master lose face? That person might be dead by now. What Great Elder Princess thought of, Jingwan naturally also thought of. Foster mother, you probably have heard about what happened in Jiangnan. I amassed a lot of money in Jiangnan. I just don't know whether they came for Prince Jin and happened to come for me, or they came for me in the first place. You amassed a lot of money because of His Majesty. Great Elder Princess thought that she knew Jingwan to some extent. And according to the financial resources of Prince Jin's mansion, it was really unnecessary. You are wise, foster mother. Jingwan admitted generously. Then it's okay. Because of His Majesty, you are stigmatized. Based on my understanding of His Majesty, if someone dares to do anything to you at this time, he will definitely protect you. Yes. It's more troublesome if the King of Hell finds fault with me. After all, whether it's me or Prince Jin, he will lose face. Prince Jin is not a person who will suffer losses. I've worried for nothing. Thinking of Li Hongyuan's temper and virtue, Great Elder Princess couldn't help having a headache. It was good enough that he didn't make trouble for others. Those who rushed to make trouble for him were either out of their minds or out of their minds. Then, they talked about the scenery in Jiangnan as usual. Speaking of which, Great Elder Princess had also been to Jiangnan. At this time, she was more nostalgic about it. Sister Wan, you are finally back. Hearing the voice before seeing the person, it was none other than old Mistress Yu Yao. It seems that Yu Yao came back earlier than expected. When Jingwan entered Great Elder Princess's mansion, she heard from Great Elder Princess that Yu Yao went back to the main residence of the Jiang family with her brother and happened to come back today. It was either noon or the next day. What a coincidence. Hearing this, Great Elder Princess also smiled. She didn't want to say anything about the daughter of her superior who had been led astray. Her son didn't become an official, so she didn't want to say anything. Only this young daughter seemed to be good in all aspects now, which was a great comfort. Yu Yao rushed in hurriedly. When she saw her mother, she realized that she had forgotten herself. She stood properly and said, "Mother, pay my respects to you." "Mother, I'm back." Great Elder Princess nodded and didn't get angry. Old Mistress Yu Yao looked relieved and secretly stuck out her little tongue. She thought that others didn't see it, but in fact, Great Elder Princess and Jingwan saw it clearly. Both of them burst into laughter. Yu Yao turned to Jingwan and said, "Sister Wan, I miss you so much. You have been in Jiangnan for so long." Jingwan held Yu Yao in her arms and said, "I also miss Yu Yao. Our Yu Yao has grown taller and is about to become a big girl." "Isn't she about to become a big girl? I already look like a big girl." Yu Yao stuck out her small chest and said, "Yes, yes, yes." Then some people came in. Obviously, they were Yu Yao's companions. There were 2 couples and their children, 4 adults and 3 children. Compared with Yu Yao, these people were much more well-behaved. The 2 men were graceful and well-behaved, while the 2 young women were a little reserved. It was okay in ordinary families, but in Great Elder Princess's mansion, they seemed to be a little unpresentable. However, Jingwan also saw that because Great Elder Princess didn't like them, they were a little afraid of Great Elder Princess. Naturally, Great Elder Princess was more unhappy. It was simply a vicious circle. And the children seemed to be a little bit like their mother. Jingwan's status was obvious, so they saluted her again. Jingwan nodded and asked them to be excused. "Prince Jin is also in the mansion. Your father is accompanying him to the outer study. You 2 brothers can go and have a look." "Yes, mother. We'll take our leave." The 2 brothers left one after another. Without the backbone, Jingwan felt that the remaining people were a little pitiful. In fact, Great Elder Princess was not a fierce person. Did she have to be like this? Great Elder Princess frowned again, but she didn't lose her temper in the end. "Princess Jean brought back a lot of good things from the south of the Yangtze River for me. There are a lot of things. You can take some back by yourselves." "Yes, thank you, mother." Great Elder Princess waved her hand and sent them away impatiently. After they left, she sighed to Jingwan, "I don't know whether it's right or wrong to choose such a daughter-in-law." In order to reassure the emperor, Great Elder Princess chose daughters-in-law from small families, who were naturally not presentable in her eyes. Jingwan didn't answer. Everything was like drinking water. Only people knew whether it was hot or cold. As the saying went, if you were willing to give up, you would get something. However, obviously, Great Elder Princess didn't want to get an answer from Jingwan. "Sister, did you bring me a gift?" Yu Yao shook Jingwan's hand and asked coquettishly. "How can I not bring you a gift? You are becoming more and more unruly." Great Elder Princess scolded softly. Yu Yao knew that her mother wasn't really angry, so she wasn't afraid at all. "What did you give me?" "Mother, can I go and have a look now?" Go. You are making my head ache here." Great Elder Princess said with disdain. Yuya walked away with a smile and ran away as soon as she was out of her mother's sight. They are all debt collectors. Great Elder Princess rubbed her temples, but there was a smile at the corner of her mouth. Children are not all debt collectors of their parents. Generation after generation, they first collect debts from their parents, and then their children collect debts from them. No one can escape from it. Yes. Jingwan, what about you? Is there any good news in your belly? Great Elder Princess's eyes naturally fell on Jingwan's belly. Under such circumstances, unless one was like Sun Yijia, who got pregnant after getting married, they would definitely be urged to get pregnant. No one could escape. It's fate to have a child. Let nature take its course. Of course, she couldn't tell Great Elder Princess the truth. Later, Great Elder Princess wanted to ask her to stay for dinner, but the Imperial Palace suddenly summoned Li Hongyuan. Before Li Hongyuan left, he sent someone to ask Jingwan. Jingwan directly got up and left. Great Elder Princess didn't ask her to stay. Even if Li Hongyuan was an idle prince, Great Elder Princess wouldn't interfere in the affairs of the imperial court. After all, it was a special period. White could be smeared black, so it was better to be careful. At the gate of Great Elder Princess's mansion, Jingwan and Li Hongyuan parted ways. One went to the imperial palace, while the other went back to the prince's mansion. Li Hongyuan left most of the guards of honor to Jingwan, and he went directly on his horse. In Jingwan's opinion, it was mostly about the matter in Jiangnan. As long as the final result was not out, Prince Jin, as an imperial envoy, was the kind of imperial envoy who left other officials aside. It was impossible for him to refuse to do it. Although he could disobey Emperor Luqing, there should be a limit. It would be bad if Emperor Luqing issued an imperial edict to invite him. Jingwan sat in the carriage, slightly closed her eyes, and fiddled with the Buddha beads on her left wrist with her right hand, thinking about something. There were some things that Li Hongyuan didn't say clearly, but Jingwan could feel the tension from some of the letters. Even if she knew that Li Hongyuan had great power and it was not easy for him to get the throne, she still couldn't help worrying about him as long as the dust didn't settle. She couldn't do anything for him, and she couldn't drag him down. There was the sound of hurried horse hooves, followed by the neighing of the horse, and the carriage suddenly shook. Because of inertia, Jingwan directly hit the wall of the carriage, and it soon came to a complete stop. Jingwan rubbed her aching arm. What happened? Someone rode a horse and hit the carriage, disturbing Wang Fei. Asking Wang Fei for forgiveness. And Yi's voice came from outside the window. Jingwan's brows slightly moved. Daring to ride a horse in the capital, Jingwan had to say good guts. But daring to hit the guard of honor of the living king of hell, that was equivalent to eating 100 bears' heart and leopard's guts. Ask clearly who it is. If it's an emergency, let the other party take the responsibility of riding a horse and receive the punishment himself. If it's deliberately riding a horse, take the person and hand it over to the governor's office to deal with according to the law. Obviously, no matter what the situation was, Jingwan didn't intend to pursue the matter when she was hit. Jingwan didn't pursue the matter, but Yi and the others didn't necessarily not pursue the matter. Offending Wang Fei wasn't a small matter, so how could they not pursue the matter? Later, when their master pursued the matter, they would all be punished. It was originally fine, but disaster simply fell from the sky. However, right now, whatever Wang Fei said was what it was. Was this obeying on the surface but opposing on the inside? Absolutely not. Jingwan prepared to continue to close her eyes and rest, but, outside, do you know who this young master is? Jingwan sighed in her heart. With this standard tone of a hedonistic little tyrant, she knew that this matter couldn't be settled peacefully. He had to use his power to bully people. However, it was clear that the other party didn't live in the capital, but they definitely had power and influence. Otherwise, how could they dare to be arrogant in front of the living king of hell? Leaving it for consideration, Jingwan was 80 to 90% sure of the other party's identity. Leaning over, she slightly lifted the curtain of the window and looked outside. There were 7 or 8 strong guards with a deep murderous aura. At a glance, one could tell that they were soldiers who had experienced hundreds of battles. This kind of person should be respected for protecting the country, but now they were being driven by the little tyrant. Moreover, for her husband's face, she couldn't back down. Jingwan put down the curtain and sat quietly, letting Annie and the others deal with it. As expected, a conflict immediately broke out between the two sides. At this time, Mama Gong also lifted the curtain and came in. Firstly, she was worried that the horses outside would be startled again. Secondly, Mama Gong heard the noise just now and was 100% sure that Jingwan had been hit. She was worried and wanted to take a look. Jingwan wasn't surprised. Mama Gong had always been careful and didn't hide anything. She directly rolled up her sleeves. No one thought that an accident would happen. Because she was caught off guard, the hit wasn't light and a large bruise appeared on her arm. Mama Gong frowned and took out medicine from a hidden box in the carriage. She applied it on Jingwan's arm and rubbed it. This pain wasn't unbearable. Your Highness, you should already know the other party's identity, right? Mama Gong asked softly. Yes. The He family has been guarding the Northeast since 50 years ago. Now it's the 3rd generation. They have 100,000 soldiers and are known as the Northeast Army. They are like the stabilizing force of Qi Yuan in the Northeast. Unlike other generals, the He family lives in the northeast border town and returns to the capital every 3 years to report on their work. As far as I know, in the past years, it was the commander-in-chief who came back with about 100 people. This year, it seems that even his family members have come back. Was there something unknown about this? No matter who it is, His Highness won't let them go if they hurt Her Highness. Jingwan was silent. This was an obvious thing. If it was really an accident, she would say a few words to persuade him. But obviously, it wasn't. This little tyrant was used to being arrogant. In the northeast border town, his family was the boss, equivalent to the local tyrant. Naturally, no one dared to do anything to him. Even in the capital, he had the capital to be arrogant. However, he was no longer at the top of the pyramid. If he ran into the hands of the King of Hell, it was like running into an iron plate. Even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. Logically speaking, the other party was a real fierce army. The guards of the prince's residence were carefully selected, so they couldn't be compared. Annie and the others couldn't show their full strength in order to avoid being exposed. However, who told Jingwan to have more people on her side? Moreover, during the training, several people worked together. It took a long time, but the final result didn't change. That little tyrant still wanted to clamor, but his mouth was blocked. Your Highness, how should we deal with these people? Annie didn't directly send them to the capital government, but asked again. https://11/11807/6654065. Mobile edition. Chapter 368. Bring them back to the Wangfu. When Wang Ye returns, let General He come to the Wangfu to pick them up. Some people were not taught a profound lesson and would never know their mistakes. Yes. And he answered and waved his hand. The Wangfu's bodyguards stepped forward, one person each, with a knife on their neck. They could either walk on their own or directly knock them out and take them away. Moreover, it was very clear that if they were knocked out, the integrity of their bodies would not be guaranteed. As for that little overlord, Annie personally took care of him. Following that, the road was more spectacular, but most people's reaction was, which family didn't have eyes to provoke Jin Wangye? This was an old man wanting to hang himself, disliking that his life was too long. Since Jingwan said to hand it over to Li Hongyuan to handle, naturally she wouldn't go see that little overlord. She only instructed An Yi and the others to watch over them and not touch them for the time being. When Li Hongyuan returned from the palace, it was already afternoon, but Jingwan had just finished her lunch. Li Hongyuan was chased and intercepted by a group of old men in the palace, wanting to know more about Jiangnan. Li Hongyuan was annoyed by them and his mood naturally became unhappy. In the end, he was completely impatient. Yu Zhongqing basically knew everything, and the matter of going out to investigate and arrest was Li Xuyan's responsibility. Don't look for him again. Even if he asked again, he wouldn't say a word. It was not good for him to make a move on this group of old men, but in their family, there were some who could take a beating. With such a blatant threat, this group of old officials could only pinch their noses and not utter a word. After the wrangling, it was almost time for lunch. Lu Qingdi let Li Hongyuan accompany him to eat. Then, Lu Qingdi mentioned the matter of Gue Fei Su to Li Hongyuan. Imperial concubine Su naturally didn't dare to tell Lu Qingdi the real reason for the estrangement between mother and son. She only said that there was some misunderstanding between them. Yuan He thought that she cared more about her son, so he got angry and refused to talk to her. Imperial concubine Su was very haggard these 2 days, and her eyes were also red. It seemed that she had cried a lot. Lu Qingdi didn't think about what happened in Jiangnan because Yu Zhongqing was there. Yu Zhongqing was his confidant. If Li Hongyuan hid something from Li Hongming, as long as he compared it with Yu Zhongqing, it would be clear. In fact, Yu Zhongqing's situation was the same as that of Li Hongyuan's Qingbing, so Lu Qingdi easily believed Imperial Consort Su's words. Lu Qingdi didn't know that Yu Zhongqing and Qingbing's things were all prepared by him beforehand. Therefore, from the beginning, Li Hongyuan had concealed part of Li Hongming's information. He was also certain that as long as he gave Imperial concubine Su a chance, she would open her mouth to plead for leniency. Everything was within his expectations. He had the advantage of time and place. When it came to implementation, people were also on his side. Lu Qingdi wanted to be the peacemaker and let the misunderstanding between mother and son be resolved. Naturally, it would be good for you, good for me, and good for everyone. She even painstakingly advised him. For so many years, his imperial concubine mother was clearly impartial. Sometimes, she even doted on him a little. What did she say about being a biological son? Wasn't that purely hurting his imperial concubine mother's heart? Li Hongyuan's expression became colder and colder. It seemed that he was going to contradict Lu Qingdi again, but for some reason, he finally endured it. Finally, Imperial Father, please tell my imperial concubine mother to take good care of her health. Son will pay her respects in a few days. Since you still care about your imperial concubine mother's health, why don't you go now? Once she sees you, the misunderstanding will be resolved, and she will naturally be fine. It would have been better if he didn't say it. As soon as he said it, Li Hongyuan's eyes even appeared ruthless. I won't go. Lu Qingdi naturally wasn't afraid of Li Hongyuan. On the contrary, he was a little surprised and curious at this moment. Although on the surface, there wasn't any difference when he contradicted him in the past, he felt that he was as stubborn as a calf. This was really something new to this son. So, was he really angry? You must go. This is an imperial edict. Li Hongyuan's face was gloomy as he stared at Lu Qingdi. Then, he picked up his chopsticks and got up to leave. There were dozens of imperial dishes on the table, but he didn't eat much. Imperial concubine Su didn't eat anything and was resting on the couch with her eyes closed. When she heard that Li Hongyuan had come, she quickly got up with a face full of joy. When Li Hongyuan entered and was about to greet him, Imperial concubine Su had already walked up to him and grabbed his arm. Yuan, there's no need to be so polite. Yuan, are you still angry with Imperial concubine mother? She was very careful and her grip was quite strong, as if she was afraid that Li Hongyuan would turn around and leave. Li Hongyuan tried to pull his arm away but failed. He glanced at her hand. It was well maintained and her nails were a little long. If he really used force, her nails might break. Imperial concubine Su saw this and was happy in her heart. Her son really did care about her. You were eating with your imperial father. Why did you come over now? You must not have eaten anything. I'll have the small kitchen prepare some food. You're a big man, so it's impossible for you not to eat. Servants. Imperial mother, there's no need. How can you not eat? As the saying goes, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry. I have no appetite. Li Hongyuan interrupted her, appearing rather impolite. Then, he saw Imperial concubine Su's somewhat startled expression and a trace of annoyance flashed across his face. He blamed himself, but refused to apologize in a fit of pique. Imperial concubine Su laughed. If there's no need, then there's no need. You're a big man. It's fine to eat 1 or 2 meals. Li Hongyuan looked away. Imperial mother, if you have something to say, just say it. This son still has something to do. What could Li Hongyuan have to do? In Imperial concubine Su's eyes, he was still angry. Then sit down and talk. There's no need. Thinking about it, some things can be solved with just a few words. Imperial concubine Su was helpless. Some things couldn't be explained clearly and would only make things worse. After some consideration, she mentioned Yu Zhongqing and Lu Qingdi without the slightest doubt. Yuan, you've already made arrangements. Imperial concubine Su faintly revealed some disbelief. Li Hongyuan looked at her and then reached out. He firmly but subconsciously cautiously brushed Imperial concubine Su's hand away. His face was cold and hard. Imperial mother, you didn't think this son would do these things from the beginning, right? I don't get along with Li Hongming, and I don't get along with all my brothers. However, Li Hongming is your son. If his situation is too bad, you will definitely be worried, and you won't be able to sleep at night. After all, this isn't like those small fights in the past. Then, do you want me to just watch and do nothing? This son erased some things when I was in Jiangnan. Or do you think that with Yu Zhongqing by your side at all times, everything is transparent in his eyes? Am I that incompetent? Imperial concubine Su definitely didn't expect this layer of relationship. However, after thinking about it for a moment, she should know that it wasn't impossible. It was inevitable. Yuan had always been a filial child, but she had completely neglected him. To a certain extent, wasn't it also a kind of denial to him? No wonder he was so angry. Imperial concubine Su's heart was stifled and she could only shake her head to deny it. No. However, there were more things that she couldn't say. Yuan, why didn't you tell Imperial mother earlier? Tell you? Why should I tell you earlier? Li Hongyuan's coldness seemed to contain a trace of stubbornness. If I told you, would you hide it from him? Then let Li Hongming be grateful to this son. There's no need. This son didn't do it for him. Then, would you also thank this son for him? Imperial concubine Su seemed to understand this time. They had been at odds since they were young. Now that he suddenly did something for the other party, no matter what the consideration was, the other party would express gratitude. Then, the way they got along in the past would be broken. In this way, perhaps both parties would feel uncomfortable and simply say nothing. Anyway, as Yuan said, he didn't do it for Ming. In the end, it was because he felt uncomfortable in his heart. She understood, but she couldn't say it out loud. Especially the last sentence, because he was really right. In this, it seemed that he didn't consider her feelings. As a mother, she didn't think much of it, but the truth was that as a mother, she thanked her adopted son for her son. Yuan thought of everything and didn't want to see such a scene, so he chose not to say anything. In the end, she was the one who opened her mouth to plead first, creating a gap between mother and son. When she pleaded for mercy, the pain in her son's heart was probably countless times worse than expected. Imperial concubine Sue's body and lips trembled, but she couldn't say anything. Because no matter what, she had already done the wrong thing, and Yuan's heart was already hurt. If she said too much, it might cause him to rebel in his heart and think that she was really biased. Li Hongyuan lowered his head. Mother, this son won't be entering the palace to pay respects for a while. This son needs to calm down. Please forgive this son. This son will take his leave. Imperial concubine Su could only watch Li Hongyuan's back as he left, seemingly lonely and sad. She wanted to dissolve the estrangement, but failed. Instead, the estrangement deepened. Imperial concubine Su hadn't eaten or slept well in the past 2 or 3 days. At this moment, she felt her blood rush up, and her head spin. Her body went limp, and she fell to the ground. Imperial concubine, her trusted maid, hurried forward. Someone, quickly call the imperial physician. What imperial physician? Don't call him. Help this concubine up. I'll be fine after lying on the bed for a while. If she fell ill when her son came, wouldn't her son be accused of being unfilial? Although her son's reputation wasn't good, he shouldn't be accused of being unfilial, especially since she was the one who brought it upon him. The maid didn't dare to disobey her and hurriedly helped her up. Imperial concubine, how about this servant go and ask the prince to come back? You're not allowed to go. He's already sad. Seeing this concubine like this, he should blame himself and feel guilty. This concubine was originally in the wrong this time. Provincial governor, don't make it public. When the imperial physician checks my pulse in 2 days, just have him secretly prescribe some medicine. Imperial concubine Su rubbed her temples, revealing her weakness and exhaustion. Imperial concubine Su was both physically and mentally exhausted. It wasn't only because of Li Hongyuan's matter, but also because Jingwan's disheveled appearance the day before yesterday, as well as her capable aunt being beaten to death. The imperial concubines who came to her palace to comfort her came in droves. Some praised her openly, while others sneered and ridiculed her. Of course, none of them really dared to point their fingers at her face. In reality, this wasn't a big deal to her. If she couldn't even endure this, how could she have a foothold in the harem? Imperial concubine Su refused to call for an imperial physician, so she could only deal with the health pills she usually ate. After leaving the Jade Essence Palace, he actually heard the slight chaos, but what did that have to do with him? He looked back, then brushed the place where Imperial concubine Su had grabbed, as if brushing away something dirty. Then, he directly left the palace. On the way back to the main courtyard, Li Hongyuan already knew that Jingwan had been bumped into. Not only had the horse been startled, the carriage had almost flipped over. Although the guards outside reacted quickly and managed to control the carriage, Jingwan had still been injured. In the blink of an eye, Li Hongyuan's body was shrouded in hostility. Go and receive your punishment. 50 lashes each. Yes. An E replied. He didn't dare and wouldn't have any meaning. Has the He family's people already arrived at the residence? Yes, but Wang Fei said to wait for Wang Ye to come back to deal with it, so she didn't let the He family's people in. Although the He family's people temporarily left, they should have left people near the residence. Seeing that master has returned, they should come again soon. When this prince entered the palace, I met with General He. Go break his arms and legs. If the He family's people come again, block them for this prince. Yes. Jingwan was a little surprised to see Li Hongyuan at this time. Because she was alone, she ate relatively quickly. The people in the palace should still be eating at this time. Jingwan didn't think too much about it. She just ordered the servants to prepare some food. It didn't need to be too sumptuous, but it had to be fast. Li Hongyuan didn't have an appetite and didn't want to eat. I'm sorry, but I'm really hungry now. While waiting for the food, Li Hongyuan hugged Jingwan and kissed her. Jingwan didn't push him away. After being married for more than half a year, she guessed that this man was not only crazy but also had skin thirst. The longer they were separated, the more clingy he became. However, this kind of situation only happened to her. Moreover, this man really was a bit of a neat freak. Because he wanted to settle accounts with her. In order to settle accounts as soon as possible, Jingwan did some research on his past. The best person to find out was naturally Eunuch Mu. Therefore, when Eunuch Mu came back to report the news, Jingwan asked him. In order to create a strong and loyal image for the male master in front of the female master, Eunuch Mu naturally told her everything he knew. Li Hongyuan didn't like being served. He basically did the daily bathing and dressing himself. Occasionally, he would ask someone to wipe his back. The only thing he needed others to take care of was his hair. From a long time ago, it was Eunuch Mu who did this. The palace maids and maids couldn't get close to him at all. Every time Eunuch Mu did it, he had to wash himself clean first. If he was dissatisfied with anything, he would be in trouble. It was true that Li Hongyuan doted on them for 7 days, and it was also true that many women loved Li Hongyuan so much that they fell deeply in love with him. However, Wang Yi did not even touch a single one of them. Those who lasted for 7 days were all relatively special women. They were basically acting in concert with Li Hongyuan to make outsiders believe that Li Hongyuan was indeed lustful. At the same time, it also balanced the women who stayed by Li Hongyuan's side for 1 or 2 days, so that no one would suspect that Li Hongyuan did not touch any of them. According to Eunuch Mu, the prince disliked those women because they were dirty. When they were close to him, their breaths were dirty. After knowing this, Jingwan touched her chin. She really couldn't believe it. Her husband's virginity might have been ended by her. Although she didn't directly ask Eunuch Mu such a question, Jingwan could almost come to this conclusion. Eunuch Mu was 7 or 8 years older than Li Hongyuan. He had been with Li Hongyuan since he was 5 or 6 years old. No one knew more about Li Hongyuan's private affairs than he did. It was no wonder that Jingwan was so surprised. Putting aside Li Hongyuan's skill in flirting, and the way he did it in bed at the beginning, he was clearly a master among masters. He didn't seem like someone who had never tasted the taste of sex before. However, from Mu Hen's point of view, it seemed that he didn't need to tell such a lie. After all, no matter how dissolute and absurd a man was before marriage, as long as he didn't have anyone except his wife by his side after marriage, he could be regarded as a first-class man in a woman's eyes. Except for her, no one would feel a little uncomfortable. Before the princess got married, she would specially send a maid to test the marriage. Eunuch Mu must have the same idea. There was no need to make up a lie that Li Hongyuan had never touched a woman. So, someone was just gifted. He was so fierce and energetic in bed. In fact, it was because he had been accumulating it for a long time. Jingwan patted her head. She didn't pay attention to it and got it dirty. However, Jingwan was really happy about this. She didn't even notice that the little discomfort buried deep in her heart had disappeared without a trace. Therefore, when Li Hongyuan was intimate with her at this moment, she just let him be. Even when the maid came in and out, she didn't push him away. Li Hongyuan's eyes flashed slightly. What he once understood was from the words of the shadow guards, and what he knew was from her appearance. Now, he understood her heart more and more. Now, he was almost certain that something must have happened during the time he was not around. It was obviously a good thing for him. After that, during the meal, Jingwan kept putting food into his bowl with a smile. Sometimes, she even fed him directly. Li Hongyuan directly held her in his arms. Jingwan didn't object and fed him naturally. Li Hongyuan thought that she would be willing to feed him mouth to mouth. He glanced at the maid, who lowered her head and wished she could shrink her head into her stomach. Li Hongyuan didn't do that in the end. Perhaps from now on, he didn't need to deliberately train her. Wan's awareness would be deeply ingrained in her bones. Li Hongyuan's stomach was full, and his heart was satisfied. Jingwan wanted to take a nap, and Li Hongyuan also accompanied her. When she fell asleep, he got up and called Nanny Gong and Eunuch Mu. After asking, he got the answer. Li Hongyuan couldn't help laughing. How could this be described as a vinegar jar? It was clearly a sea of vinegar. She was so happy just because he hadn't touched other women before. Her possessiveness wanted the unity of body and mind. She wanted everything. If one was missing, she would probably abandon it like a worn-out shoe. In this life, Li Hongyuan had kept his chastity not only because he knew that Jingwan cared about this aspect. In fact, in his previous life, his desires had been relatively indifferent. Because he was a prince, he was like most men. He had never cared about other women's feelings, let alone serve them wholeheartedly. As long as he was satisfied, it was fine. In reality, other than certain places that they had to touch, including his princess consort, it seemed that they didn't have much intimate contact with him. After a certain amount of time, they would naturally separate. There was not a single exception. Because he was gifted, every time he slept with them, they were very unwilling to get close to him. They were even a little afraid because he was too ruthless and brought them only pain and no pleasure. They suffered every time. Anyone would be unhappy. They were unhappy, and Li Hongyuan was naturally disdainful. They just wanted a child and tried their best to seduce him. What kind of person did they think Li Hongyuan was? Therefore, those women were no different from the cold palace. Later, when he became the emperor, he was first in the chaos of war. After the country stabilized, his health gradually deteriorated. The number of times he entered the harem could be counted on one's fingers. Moreover, he felt bored in bed. Thinking about the only night with Jingwan, he could have some fun. In the last few years, he didn't enter the harem at all. As for the empress, who the hell was that? Except for consort Xian, who was in charge of the harem, there was no other woman above the rank of consort. The court officials knew about his health condition, and he was known as a tyrant. There were only a few women in his harem, and no one dared to say a word. The influence of that time seemed to be carried over to this life, and some situations naturally became more and more serious. In the end, it wasn't that other women might have traumatized him, but that Jingwan left a deep impression in his heart. A man's passion and desire were separate. When it came to him, they couldn't be separated. https://11/11807/6654071. We will handle it as soon as possible. Chapter 369. The He family's people came. Li Hongyuan lazily asked. Yes. According to Master's instructions, they blocked the door. However, knowing that Master is in the Fu, they didn't intend to leave. Because of Jingwan, Li Hongyuan's mood was not bad. However, he also saw the bruise on Jingwan's arm. That was the person he held at the apex of his heart. Someone actually hurt her. It was absolutely unforgivable. Bring them to the martial arts arena. As he spoke, Li Hongyuan stood up. Although it wasn't a good time to move his muscles and bones, but for a living king of hell who would do whatever he wanted to do, did he need to pick a time to do something? Naturally, he didn't need to. Inside the martial arts arena, there were weapon racks on both sides. Although they might not be used, there were all kinds of weapons. Li Hongyuan took the spear that he was most comfortable with. The spear was more than 1 zhang long. The body of the spear was pitch black and carved with exquisite patterns. The surface was faintly glowing. The spearhead was bright and the cold light was threatening. With a flick of his hand, he grabbed the end of the spear and skillfully shook it. The entire body of the spear shook and made a buzzing sound. After that, he executed a set of spear techniques. In his hands for a long time, it was as if he was using his arms and fingers. As the saying goes, the body is like a swimming dragon, graceful like a startled swan. When the imperial bodyguards brought the little tyrant he and his bodyguards over, Li Hongyuan's spear techniques were only half completed. Not to mention the little tyrant whose hands and feet were broken, the others were all people who had truly fought on the battlefield. At this time, when they saw Li Hongyuan, they couldn't help but be aghast. It must be known that Jin Qinhuang's illustrious reputation was something they had all heard of. However, seeing the other party in this manner, some of the rumors were instantly shattered. At the very least, this man absolutely couldn't be useless. That cold murderous aura, every move, every style, all revealed a murderous intent. This wasn't a prince who lived like a prince, but a killing god who walked down from the battlefield. At this moment, their eyes were all on Li Hongyuan. They forgot about the little Gongzi that they were supposed to protect and let him lie on the ground like soft mud. After a set of spear techniques was completed, the spear was stuck on the ground with a bang. It felt as if the ground was about to split open. Li Hongyuan's figure was like the gun in his hand, a pole. 2 people in a team. Come and fight with this prince. If you win, this prince will consider meeting the He family. If you lose, Li Hongyuan's eyes fell on little gangster He. He suddenly curled his lips into a smile. It was supposed to be an extremely seductive smile, but at this moment, it made people shudder. It won't be as simple as breaking your arms and legs. After all, little gangster He only had his joints dislocated, and his bones weren't really hurt. These soldiers who were temporarily acting as guards wanted to save him without hesitation at that time, but when they realized this, they restrained themselves. However, at this moment, they thought of what the people in the prince's mansion said at that time: you should be glad that the master doesn't have the time to deal with you now. If the master did it himself, even if you didn't die, you would be half dead. Now, they believed it without any hesitation. Li Hongyuan was standing in the middle of the field, so they didn't have a choice. Therefore, the 8 people looked at each other and quickly divided into 4 groups. They didn't dare to be arrogant and say things like one-on-one. They also didn't feel that Jin Qinhuang was looking down on them. There were some things that people with discerning eyes could see. Moreover, they were able to mix in from new recruits to veterans. They often had a beast-like intuition that allowed them to survive on the battlefield again and again. The strength of the enemy, they could basically sense it at first glance. Choose your own weapon. Seeing that you are guarding Qi Yuan's territory, this prince will remind you. If you don't show your ability, you will die in vain. In the capital, this prince has killed a few people. Killing is killing. There's no difference whether it's a noble or a lowly one. That's right, these people were loyal to the country, so Li Hongyuan slightly respected them. The 2 people's hearts trembled. They didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest. They chose their weapons and directly attacked. They were boorish people and didn't pay attention to any rules. Because on the battlefield, no one would talk about rules with you. Moreover, these people, although they had been trained, but more of their killing skills were trained on the battlefield. They didn't talk about any moves. They only had one purpose: kill, kill, kill. In reality, ever since Li Hongyuan came back, he really didn't have a chance to use his real strength. He usually practiced his moves. Even when he looked for Fu Yunting to feed his moves, he still had a sense of propriety. Even last year at White Dragon Temple, because he wanted to put on a trick of injuring himself to gain the enemy's confidence, in front of Jingwan, he only used about half of his strength. Also, when he encountered an assassination on the way to the Summer Palace, he still mostly vented his emotions. But now, his blood was really boiling. Boiling, of course, he didn't show any mercy. Moreover, he spent a lot of time on the battlefield in his previous life. Even the emperor had to take the lead, because at that time, Li Hongyuan was truly crazy and fearless. The people he was facing were indeed people who had been on the battlefield and killed many enemies. However, ever since the He family took over the northeast of Qiyuan, there had never been a large-scale war. Compared to what Li Hongyuan had seen and experienced, it was a far cry from what he had seen and experienced. Moreover, he knew all kinds of ways to use it on the battlefield. Li Hongyuan used his real strength, and the aura on his body became more and more obvious. Then, not long after, blood could be seen. Throat, heart, eyes, and even lower body. In Li Hongyuan's eyes, the experienced people seemed to be full of openings. There was no way to avoid or escape. Fortunately, Li Hongyuan always stopped at the last moment and didn't cause any serious damage to them. This was enough to show that he had super strong control of his strength. The more he was like this, the more terrifying it was. This meant that he really could easily control the life and death of his opponents. And he and the others knew that their master was very strong, but they didn't know how strong he was. Now that they saw it, it was probably beyond their expectations. However, with just these two people, it was impossible for their master to use his full strength. They could feel that Li Hongyuan's current state would be very disappointing if he continued. If he was disappointed, he might really kill them. In fact, as Li Hongyuan said, it was nothing if he killed two people. However, these people couldn't be killed. Because if they were killed, it would probably cause the entire northeast army of 100,000 people to not hide it from their master or the imperial family. Thinking about it, they knew that they were risking their lives at the border. In the end, their brothers who went through fire and water didn't die on the battlefield, but were inexplicably killed by the Wang of the country they were loyal to. How could they not be angry and sullen? At that time, it was hard to say what the consequences would be. And he thought for a moment, 2 more of you go. Making a decision without authorization, and he was also prepared to receive punishment later. And he could see it clearly, and so could these soldiers. Without hesitation, they directly chose their weapons and charged forward. They originally thought that it might be the result of 1 + 1 = 2, but in fact, it was far greater than 2. As the direct opponent, Li Hongyuan could naturally clearly feel it and quickly discovered the reason. It wasn't that the 2 people who came later were stronger, but because the 4 people formed a small formation with both offense and defense. Thus, how could the power not increase? This kind of unforeseen event made Yi and the others a little worried. Their standing posture involuntarily changed, ready to attack at any time. However, they quickly discovered that their worries were unnecessary. Although it was a formation, Li Hongyuan immediately saw that this small formation had been simplified and couldn't display its full power. Moreover, there were also flaws. If his guess wasn't wrong, the complete formation should be 8 people, perhaps just adding the 4 outside the field. Li Hongyuan's offensive was slightly restrained. It looked like he was being suppressed. However, he seized the flaw and destroyed the formation in one fell swoop. the original power plummeted. Perhaps because they were caught off guard, the effect of 1 + 1 was less than 2. As a result, the field returned to the initial situation. The 4 people had more and more wounds on their bodies. Perhaps it was about time. Li Hongyuan used his long spear to send them flying one after another. The 4 people who smashed hard on the ground only felt their chests tremble slightly and coughed up blood slightly. However, they didn't have any resentment. Instead, they looked at Li Hongyuan with excitement and reverence. Their thoughts were the simplest, and that was to worship the strong. Li Hongyuan's aura didn't diminish, again. When the remaining 4 people heard this, they immediately went on stage. All of them were somewhat excited. Chapter 370. The people of the Wangfu were in awe of Li Hongyuan, but these soldiers were purely in reverence. It was mainly because of the first impression and the degree of understanding of the real Li Hongyuan. Don't look at how these soldiers were like now. If they really worked for him like an E and the others, it wouldn't be long before they would be like them. Thinking about it this way, they were a bit envious of these soldiers. As the saying goes, ignorance is bliss. These words weren't false at all. The last 4, as expected, had the same ending as the first 4. However, the light in these people's eyes was even more intense. After watching the battle, An Yi was thoughtful. He seemed to understand a little bit of his master's purpose for suddenly doing this. Beating around the bush to deal with people had never been their master's style. His muscles and bones were completely relaxed. Li Hongyuan's body heated up and there was an indescribable carefree feeling. He casually threw the spear in his hand and it steadily landed on the weapon rack. Then he walked towards the little gangster who was lying on the ground. Only then did the few soldiers restrain their exposed emotions and somewhat nervously looked over. They had lost, and the one who suffered was the little Gongzi. But with their current situation, even if they were to face Jin Qinwang alone, they would not be able to stop him, not to mention that there were still a bunch of guards standing guard. The group of imperial guards of the Wangfu also looked over, but they wouldn't have known if they didn't see. Now that they saw it, the expression on their faces cracked a bit. Actually, they had already discovered before that this boy was actually very unyielding. When his hands and feet were broken, he only frowned at that time. Just based on this point, they still respected him as a man. He was worthy of being born in a family of generals. If it was those dandy Gongzi in the capital, they would be howling like pigs being slaughtered. Only this one, his mother, that fanatical expression was even more intense than those soldiers. Li Hongyuan's feet subtly paused. Although others didn't see it, his following kicks were not the least bit careless. The first kick landed on the shoulder and the little gangster who was lying on the ground was flipped half a circle. The angle also shifted. After that, Li Hongyuan took 2 steps forward with a feeling of taking a leisurely stroll. The next kick landed on the side of the ribs, making people seem to hear the sound of bones cracking. Taking a leisurely stroll or whatever, it was definitely an illusion. After several kicks, little gangster spat out blood as expected. It was obvious that his internal organs were injured. However, he only let out 2 muffled groans. He didn't cry or beg for mercy. Little gangster was definitely a tough guy. In the end, Li Hongyuan stepped on little Tyrant's chest, but he didn't use much strength. He squatted down, moved his toes, and touched little Tyrant's chin. Then, he met little Tyrant's burning eyes. Alright, this description was a bit strange, but it was the truth. Although little Tyrant's injuries were not light, and his expression was slightly distorted, he was still filled with passion. If Jingwan was here, she would probably give him a reasonable title, which was a fanboy, a brainless fanboy. Li Hongyuan didn't have any other emotions except for the first time. It wasn't that he hadn't seen little Tyrant's condition in other people before. For example, Wan Fangfei in the past, and some of the girls who were favored by Xingdou. However, in comparison, it wasn't so obvious. Of course, Li Hongyuan also knew that the meaning behind this was different. Speaking of little gangster Li Hongyuan was very familiar with him. Of course, that was in his previous life. According to the time, he had to wait for a few more years. When he went on expeditions, little gangster he was one of his valiant generals. Little gangster he's name was Sea of Consciousness. He was the youngest son of He Jinwei, the general who was currently guarding the northeast border. He had 4 older brothers, 2 of whom were direct descendants and 2 of whom were concubines. Of the 4 brothers, only 2 were left. The He family was different from other families. Because they were guarding the border, they suffered a lot of losses. Therefore, among the brothers, no matter if they were direct descendants or concubines, they had a good relationship. The He family was actually quite decent. The He family's daughters-in-law didn't seem to have a high status, but most of them were women who weren't inferior to men. Although they didn't go to the battlefield with their husbands, they had at least guarded a city. However, among the He family's descendants, Sea of Consciousness was considered a weirdo. Perhaps it was because his closest brother was almost 10 years older than him, so in comparison, he might be a bit more indulgent. However, the He family didn't have the mindset of spoiling their children. Their upbringing could be said to be very strict, whether in terms of thinking or body. Because they were strict when they were young, when they grew up, they would have a better chance of surviving on the battlefield. The reason why Sea of Consciousness was called a weirdo was because his physical fitness was very good. At the same age, he had to at least triple the training to achieve the same effect. When he wasn't even 10 years old, he could already beat his older brother. However, this kid's thoughts were very rebellious. He didn't commit all kinds of crimes, but he was very arrogant and liked to cause trouble. At home, he was punished, beaten, locked, his legs were broken, and his ribs were broken, but it didn't have any effect at all. It seemed that he was born with a hard bone. In the northeast, it became a ghost's worry. When Sea of Consciousness was 12 years old, he led a group of people to sneak out of the city. Once he went out, it was close to 10 days. His family was crazy with anxiety. In the end, they didn't even have any hope. In the end, he came back alive and well. He led people to play a sneak attack and really destroyed a small tribe. Of course, in the end, there was no reward. He was ruthlessly beaten up until his skin was torn and his flesh was torn. He only got out of bed after 10 days and half a month. After that, the people at home strictly guarded against him. At any time, they sent a few valiant soldiers to follow him. General He's soldiers took turns to follow him. As a result, these people had a deep impression of this young master. Sea of Consciousness learned many things from them. Because he was too energetic, when he was 13 years old, he was simply brought to the battlefield. Although he was a bit young, the whole family didn't object. In reality, Sea of Consciousness seemed to be born to fight. On the battlefield, he could be said to be invincible. Moreover, he was a complete madman. The soldiers below actually admired him very much. Occasionally, they would also be very respectful. The reason why they were respectful was because this respect usually didn't last for more than 3 seconds. In the end, he was a very troublesome person. Sea of Consciousness was now 16 years old. A year ago, he defeated his father. Half a year ago, he defeated the He family's most powerful elder brother. On this trip back to the capital, only General He Jinwei's eldest son remained in the northeastern border city. The rest of He Jinwei's branch had all returned to the capital. Speaking of which, Sea of Consciousness was what He Jinwei was most worried about. He was afraid that he would cause trouble again. The capital wasn't like the border city. If he caused trouble in the border city, for the sake of the He family, basically no one would care too much. In the capital, if he accidentally offended the influential officials, the He family might not be able to settle it. Because the He family guarded the border, it could be said that they worked hard and contributed a lot. His Majesty treated them well and they also had some responsibilities. However, as long as one was smart, they should know that in this kind of situation, they needed to be more careful. If anything happened, they would be ruthlessly attacked. But they didn't think that something would still happen. Moreover, it was to hit a big iron plate. When the He family found out that the rascal rode a horse on the street and collided with Jin Qinhuang's carriage, not only did he not apologize, but he also dared to act violently and was arrested by the people of Jin Qinhuang Fu. They were angry and anxious, causing the family to be thrown off their feet. Before returning to the capital, they specially warned him, especially Jin Qinhuang, to never, ever offend him. They even enlarged the logo of Jin Qinhuang Fu a lot, wishing that they could directly stuff it into his brain. After entering the capital, they also restrained him. Who knew that because they had just entered the capital, there were many things to do and they were exceptionally busy. Going out would cause a big disaster. Although they quickly found out that Jin Qinhuang wasn't in the carriage, Jin Qinhuang Fei was. The more noble a woman's status was, the more delicate she was in their eyes. She couldn't be touched. If something bad happened to her, it was simply asking for a person's life. However, there was one more thing to be thankful for. That rascal didn't act impulsively. Perhaps he realized that something was wrong, or perhaps he was persuaded. Otherwise, based on his martial strength, if he let loose and fought, it would be like fighting on the battlefield. It would be strange if he didn't die. Li Hongyuan looked at He Zhihai. In his previous life, he was familiar with him after he ascended the throne. At that time, he was the only adult male left in the He family. Including He Zhenwei, they all died 2 months later. And the day they died, it just so happened to be New Year's Eve. At that time, He Zhihai didn't have this unbridled brashness. His entire person was gloomy, just like a walking murder weapon. When he followed him to battle, he witnessed He Zhihai's ruthlessness and extraordinary skills in killing the enemy. For many years after the war, He Zhihai could be said to be the stabilizing force of Qi Yuan. Just his name alone was enough to make the enemy's expression change. Li Hongyuan's current martial arts skills, to a certain extent, originated from He Zhihai. However, He Zhihai wasn't suitable to be a commander-in-chief of the entire army. He was only suitable to be a general who charged and broke through the enemy lines. Moreover, he was the kind of general who needed someone to assist him and mobilize the troops for him. He was only responsible for charging and killing. It wasn't that He Zhihai was a boorish man who didn't understand the art of war and strategy. On the contrary, He Zhihai's brain was actually quite powerful. Although he wasn't that righteous and liked to take the unconventional path, he was very good at mobilizing troops and dispatching troops. Winning with fewer troops was simply his specialty. It was just that he had lost all his family members and he himself had lost the ability to reproduce due to his serious injuries. Therefore, the only thing he had left was revenge. After the battle, he was like a sharp weapon without thinking. He only listened to Li Hongyuan's orders and commands. He fought so hard and was so fierce only because he didn't care about life and death. And when the battle was over, nothing could be seen from his appearance, but inside, he was already a useless person. At that time, Li Hongyuan saw it all. Therefore, when he had the chance to start over, he cherished talent and wanted to protect He Zhihai and make him a real commander-in-chief. He wanted to make the enemy not only change their countenance but also make the enemy's army tremble in fear. In this way, he was bound to protect the He family. This was also the reason why the He family returned to the capital this time. Of course, Li Hongyuan didn't bring them back to abandon the northeast border and ignore it. If there was no He family to guard it, the battle after more than 2 months would only be more tragic. He Jinwei was bound to go back. Li Hongyuan would remind him to strengthen the defense and secretly prepare some military supplies for him. In case there was a contingency, it would be good to keep the He family alive. Li Hongyuan also knew what He Zhihai was like now. But when he saw him in person, he was still a little surprised. What was even more unexpected was that this brat had offended his wife the moment he returned to the capital, causing her to be injured. As such, no matter how much potential and talent he had, Li Hongyuan had to teach him a lesson and then properly train him. If he did not achieve his goal, Li Hongyuan would definitely personally cripple him. "Your Highness, you're very powerful. Why don't you fight with this commoner?" Before Li Hongyuan could speak, He Zhihai said enthusiastically and expectantly. So, this brainless fanboy of his was a little different. He Zhihai's military merits were actually quite high, but his father had never asked for a title for him. These military merits were distributed to other people. He Zhihai didn't care. Because of this, the capital basically didn't know that there was such a fierce person in the He family. However, when he said this, those soldiers couldn't bear to look directly at him. However, it was completely expected. They were all too clear about this young master's temperament. "How much effort would it take for this prince to take your life now?" "Your Highness won't take this commoner's life." "What? This prince has no power or influence, so I'm afraid of your He family." Li Hongyuan didn't get angry. "No, it has nothing to do with the He family. It's just that intuition tells this commoner that your Highness won't do that." Li Hongyuan had seen He Zhihai's intuition before. In his previous life, he even relied on his intuition to save a battle. "Do you know why you're in Jin Qin Wang Fu?" "I know. This commoner can apologize to Wang Fei Nyang Nyang, kowtow, and admit his wrongs. As long as I can fight with your Highness, this commoner will do anything." He was still enthusiastic. Therefore, He Zhihai sold himself so easily. So much so that for many years in the future, when he recalled today, he couldn't help but want to bang his head against the wall. He was really too stupid. How could this master's heart be so black? It was better to quickly scram far away. Running around the borders for a lifetime, he didn't want to face Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan stood up, "Take him away." He didn't know what Li Hongyuan was going to do, so naturally, he could only obediently be taken away. Let Gong Jiu go take a look. Just let this prince see if Gong Jiu's medicine can soften people's bones. https://11/11807/6654077. Chapter 371. After Li Hongyuan finished dealing with He Zhihai, he went back to accompany his wife to sleep. As for whether He Zhihai would cry for his father and mother in pain, that was none of his business. Perhaps it was because of the familiar person, the familiar smell. When Li Hongyuan approached, Jingwan unconsciously rubbed into his arms. Her head rested on his arm, and her arm rested on his chest. She also sleep-talked, calling out, "Ah Yuan." Li Hongyuan chuckled and moved his body to let Jingwan sleep more comfortably. He touched her face and kissed her. At least at this moment, Li Hongyuan's heart was abnormally satisfied. The person at the top of his heart who had become obsessed with obsession was his legitimate wife. At this moment, she was peacefully lying in his arms, which was enough to soothe all his negative emotions. And in order to maintain everything now, and even let Jingwan be more unrestrained, he must hold the power in his hands, and no one can say anything. Jingwan woke up, and before she opened her eyes, she rubbed Li Hongyuan's shoulder and whispered twice, "Ah Yuan, en. Ah Yuan, en. Ah Yuan." Li Hongyuan turned his head to look at her and smiled silently, "En, I'm here." Ah Yuan, ah Yuan, ah Yuan, Jingwan called out again and again without saying anything else. Li Hongyuan also responded patiently. She didn't know how many times she called out, but Jingwan's heart seemed to finally be satisfied. Then she remembered the things she should have asked the day before, such as the matter of Prince Zhongfu catching fire. Later, I'll have people organize all the big and small things in the capital in the past 6 months. When the time comes, you can take your time to look at it. When Li Hongyuan said this, in a place where Jingwan couldn't see, his eyes flickered. Speaking of which, although he deliberately let people go easy on him, someone really could do it, which was indeed amazing. Jingwan responded, "How do you plan to deal with the He family's matter?" Li Hongyuan didn't hide anything and briefly told her what happened before. Although Jingwan didn't know how powerful Gong Jiu's medicine would be, she was quite optimistic about him. Well, there was a condition called hypersensitivity to pain, which would increase the pain by countless times. A small cut or hit could make people feel excruciating pain. Maybe Gong Jiu had such a medicine. If so, she would light 32 candles for He Jiu's little gangster. I heard that in the past years, General He came back with a few bodyguards and didn't have any family members. This year, is there a bad rumor? Or is there something wrong with the He family? Or is someone plotting something again? Wan, you're overthinking. It's not like that. Although the He family has worked hard and made great contributions, the Northeast is relatively stable and there are no major wars. Naturally, the He family's influence is limited, and it's far from the capital. Similarly, the He family guards the Northeast and basically has no contact with the capital. No matter how fierce the fight for the throne is, it has nothing to do with them. No one from the He family is in the capital, so the sky is high and the earth is far away. Therefore, the He family could be considered another kind of neutral party. The reason why so many people from the He family came back this time is because there's something strange going on at the northeast border. There might be a major war before spring next year. It's not appropriate for the entire He family to guard the northeast. If something unexpected happens, some people should be avoided as much as possible. So, Ah Yuan, you're the one who facilitated this. Li Hongyuan's voice was muffled as he responded. Jingwan chuckled. I know that Ah Yuan is very resourceful, so he must have received some accurate information. However, the imperial court might not know about it. Even if they knew, they probably wouldn't care. After all, the Northeast has been relatively stable for many years. Why would there be a major war suddenly? If there really is a war, or if there are heavy casualties, they might even push the blame on the He family. There's rarely a time when there's an adequate supply of provisions. The He family's Northeast army is no exception. If there's a major war, even an iron army will be like a sick cat without the support of provisions. Since Ah Yuan can't bear to do that, he must have prepared more than just a few members of the He family. She knew what he was secretly preparing. Wan knows me well. Don't flatter me. Li Hongyuan chuckled. I'm telling the truth. Moreover, in her previous life, the imperial court really did push all the blame on the He family. They said that they didn't supervise the situation properly. If He Zhihai wasn't the only one left in the He family, they might have even accused them of treason. Although the He family suffered heavy casualties and was almost wiped out, the enemy didn't fare any better. Otherwise, Qi Yuan wouldn't have been able to clean up the mess so easily. Perhaps a large piece of land in the northeast of Qi Yuan would have fallen into the enemy's hands. After getting up, she was in high spirits. As for little brat well, he wasn't a bad person in nature. It's about time to send them back. Since Jingwan said so and Li Hongyuan didn't have any other instructions, the matter was naturally settled. However, the He family didn't manage to enter Jin Qin Wangfu. Even He Jinwei didn't manage to see Li Hongyuan. The whole family was exceptionally anxious, afraid that He Zhihai would really die in Jin Qinhuang Fu. Although reason told them that no matter how lawless Jin Qinhuang was, he wouldn't go to this extent. However, it was possible to turn He Zhihai into a useless person. He Zhihai was only 16 years old and was already the #1 general in the Northeast Army. Now that he had become a useless person, it was too painful. Since they couldn't see him, the He family could only go back first. Although the He family didn't want to make the matter known to everyone, but in the entire capital, the people who should know already knew. Because it was a special period, no one stood out to blame Li Hongyuan with the He family's previous righteous indignation. They said that little Gongzi he was in the wrong first and should be punished according to law. Jin Qinhuang shouldn't abuse his power and so on. Not to mention that Jin Qinhuang couldn't be provoked, this was an occasional case. If any action was out of line, Lu Qingdi, who was still in a fit of anger, might label them as forming a clique. Let's wait for one more night. If I still don't see him tomorrow, I will directly enter the palace to see His Majesty. He Jinwei's resolute face was surrounded by deep worry at this time. This evil creature, when he comes back this time, I will break his legs and make sure he can't get out of bed before he returns to the border town. Seeing His Majesty, if possible, the He family didn't want to take this step. To what extent Lu Qingdi pampered Jin Qinhuang, they especially understood. They were a family of generals, but it didn't mean that they were all boorish people who didn't understand the ways of the world. That night, the He family didn't sleep well. After breakfast the next day, He Jinwei decided to enter the palace. But before entering the palace, he still made a trip to Jin Qinhuang Fu to see if there could be a turn for the better. The result of this trip was somewhat unexpected. From afar, he saw the gate of Jin Qinhuang Fu open and a group of people came out. Who else could it be if it wasn't He Zhihai and his 8 guards? He Jinwei hurriedly sped up. When he got closer, the gate of Jin Qinhuang Fu closed again. The other 8 people were still okay. Their clothes were a bit tattered and there were bloodstains on them, but their spirits looked good. Only He Zhihai was supported by people and looked half dead and dying. He Jinwei's heart thumped. He had never seen his son like this. Even when his legs were broken and his ribs were broken, he was still able to toss and turn with full energy. He Jinwei's body trembled and his lips trembled, but he didn't say anything. Let's talk when we get back to the Fu, quickly. Being on the battlefield all year round, this military doctor definitely couldn't be lacking. This time, the most powerful military doctor in the Northeast Army also came back. A large group of people surrounded him, anxiously waiting for the diagnosis results. The 8 military men looked at each other in dismay. That, they actually wanted to say, little Gongzi was actually fine, but, forget it, now they couldn't get a word in edgewise. After the military doctor's diagnosis, his expression was a bit strange, but the He family became even more restless because of him. The military doctor slightly paused. Does little Gongzi's body have any special feeling right now? It's all in those places. He Zhihai was weak, pain, it hurts little Yi to death. His mother, for the whole afternoon and the whole night, he had never been in so much pain. The He family members looked at each other in dismay. This evil creature was the kind of person whose bones were dislocated and immediately climbed up a tree to steal birds, the kind of person who climbed up the house to tear the tiles. He actually cried out in pain. Other than that, the military doctor continued to ask. He Zhihai rolled his eyes, understanding the military doctor's meaning. Little Yi is very good. I'm not crippled or disabled, old man, can't you diagnose? The military doctor touched his grizzled beard, the expression on his face relaxing. It seems that little Gongzi is indeed fine. He turned around and faced the He family members. Little Gongzi's body does have some injuries, but he has already taken medicine, and the effect is obvious. This old man will prescribe some more medicine, and it won't take long for him to recover. The He family members heaved a huge sigh of relief. What exactly happened? He Jinwei asked. Only then did the guard open his mouth and explain the whole matter. The He family members' expressions were very strange. So, little brother is in so much pain that he's hovering between life and death. He has been howling for too long, and now he has no strength at all. Fourth brother, shut up. He Ji Hai flew into a rage out of humiliation. https://11/11807/6654082. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Chapter 372. He Jinwei stepped forward and sat beside He Ji Hai's bed. Without holding back, he patted He Ji Hai's chest. He Ji Hai shuddered and howled miserably. The sudden sound startled everyone in the room. Then, they looked at He Ji Hai with a bit of disbelief and some worry. He Ji Hai's face turned green. Did they think he was willing? His mother, it was really too painful. He couldn't bear it at all. It should be that the effect of the medicine hasn't completely disappeared. Once the effect is gone, it won't be like this. The military doctor said with a smile. Knowing what was going on, the He family looked at He Ji Hai as if they were looking at a rare treasure. If he really howled like this for the entire afternoon and night, to still have this spirit, it should be considered not bad. Moreover, his throat hasn't gone hoarse. He Ji Hai looked at this group of family members who rejoiced in his misfortune. He was too lazy to even roll his eyes and didn't have the mind to explain. At this moment, it was indeed very painful, but it was basically within the range of tolerance. In any case, from small to large, each and every one of them were waiting for him to suffer, wanting to see him make a fool of himself. They all wanted him to be taught a lesson and behave himself. He Jinwei also touched the short beard on his chin. If there's a chance, ask Jin Qinwang what medicine was used. The effect is so good. Even if I'm thick-skinned, I'll ask for it. The effect was good. Clearly, there were two meanings. Not only was the effect of the medicine good, it was also better to deal with He Ji Hai. And, indeed, I've never seen Xiao Hai so well behaved. He Ji Hai's grandmother, old Madam He, nodded in agreement. He Ji Hai had never been a person who could hide his emotions. Therefore, everything was written on his face. At this moment, his face was like a color palette, exceptionally splendid. After relaxing a little, it was time for the proper business. What did father say to you before entering the capital that you treat father's words as wind? He Jinwei's face was exceptionally stern. He Ji Hai didn't say a word. The capital isn't like the border cities. I know that you're messing around, but you know what you're doing. You won't go overboard. However, in the capital, a small matter can cost someone's life and implicate the entire family. Why can't you behave? Do you have to throw the entire family in for you to be happy? Dad, I was wrong. I won't cause trouble in the future. He Ji Hai lowered his eyelids and said in a low voice. You have to keep your word. His spiritual seed did not say that he was grounded, because he knew that if this kid really wanted to go out, he would have a way to get out. There was simply no way to lock him up. It was better to let him walk through the door and let someone follow him. That would be of some use. He Ji Hai's eyes were filled with excitement. He indeed would not go out to cause trouble again because his next goal was very clear: to find Jin Qinwang to fight. He Jinwei's eyelids twitched. The more he looked, the more he felt that it was impossible for this kid to be so honest. There must be something he didn't know. He prepared to ask the people who had followed this evil creature out. At this moment, those bodyguards had gone to change their clothes. The wounds on their bodies also needed to be examined. Originally, the soldiers wanted to downplay the part where they exchanged blows with Li Hongyuan. Now that they were faced with General He's cold and stern face, all of them were like quails and confessed everything. He Jinwei only felt his temples throbbing. He was very clear what kind of moral character his son had. When they were in the border city, he had not been lenient when he exchanged blows with his father. Now, he had the guts to set his eyes on a Qin Wang, and it was the kind that could not be provoked. Originally, when he had offended Qin Wang Fei, the other party had just tidied him up and did not lose an arm or a leg. He should be extremely thankful. But this matter was not over yet. He was still thinking about how to deal with the aftermath. Sure enough, he should directly break that evil creature's legs so that he could not get out of bed. That would also save him a lot of worry and trouble. He Jinwei could almost imagine, wherever Qin Wang went, that evil creature would block him. That scene was simply unbearable to look at. After all, he had done this kind of thing many times in the northeast border city. It was only until those people were all knocked down that it gradually stopped. Fortunately, those soldiers were still broad-minded and did not argue with that boy. After all, to be flipped over by a young teenager in public was a very shameful matter. They even said that the younger generation would surpass the older generation. Even if those people were indignant, they would not do anything to that evil creature on account of his face. Qin Wang was different. If he really wanted to block the door, he had many guards around him. One word from him could make that evil creature suffer. After all, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. If Qin Wang was really angry and let people completely cripple him, he, as the father, could only pinch his nose and swallow his bitterness. There was no place to judge and he did not have the face to do so. He Jinwei wiped his face. There were several times when he had the impulse to beat that evil creature. When that evil creature exchanged blows, he was not lenient. Usually, if he really broke his legs, he would not dare to fight back, but in the end, he did not have the heart. To be associated with such an evil creature, Great General, he felt that his lifespan could be shortened by 10 or 20 years. Forget it, first apologizing to Qin Wang was the proper thing to do. It was just that he was a military general. In the entire capital, he did not have any close in-laws. At most, he only had distant relatives. In the past few years, he would come back with his personal guards. He would not hold a banquet, nor would he pay a visit. This time, because his family had returned, there was a possibility that he would stay in the capital in the future. A banquet was a must. Before that, it would not be good for him to pay a visit to anyone. Even if it was to apologize, it would not be good. This was in consideration of both sides. After thinking about it, Great General, he decided to start with Lu Qingdi. He explained the cause and effect clearly and let Lu Qingdi help to build a bridge. This could also show his loyalty. Before entering the palace, Great General, he still went to see He Zhihai. The father and son talked about something behind closed doors. Whether it was effective or not, he did not know for the time being. He Jinwei was very skilled in war. His EQ was also very high. After briefly explaining the matter, he began to pour out his grievances. That evil creature was such a disgrace. How could he not be worry-free? How could he give people a headache? But in the end, this evil creature is this official's son. I can't really ignore him. Lu Qingdi was not only greatly moved, he could empathize with him. He also began to pour out his grievances. He also had an evil creature's son, beloved official He, you have been far away in the border city all year round. You don't know, the living Hell King's fighting strength was much more valiant than little gangster He. When Great General he heard this, he sighed endlessly. So what? His son could still live well, it was really a miracle. With such a comparison, he actually felt that his son was actually quite obedient. Just think, if his son was really like Qin Wang, he reckoned that he would have long been angered to death. After all, no matter how he was, he could not be like Luqingdi, who could suppress everything. Zhen's evil creature, these 2 years, he has restrained himself a lot. Although he still occasionally angers Zhen, contradicts Zhen, but those messy things have decreased. Beloved official, you don't need to take it to heart. After all, it was my son who bumped into the carriage and frightened Qin Wang Fei. I should apologize to Wang Fei Nyang. Luqingdi's finger tapped on the table. Zhen is very clear about old Six's temperament. If something makes him unhappy, he won't let today's matter pass until tomorrow. As long as he stops, this matter is basically over and he won't remember it. Since he released your family's boy, it means that old Six's wife is fine. If beloved official really feels apologetic, just let your mother make a trip to Qin Wang Fu and it will be fine. Hearing Luqingdi's words, Great General, he was relieved. When He Jinwei returned home and said this, old Madam He and others were also relieved. They, as military officers, were poor. They couldn't take out much gold, silver and jewels. But in the northeast, it didn't mean that there were no good things. Precious fur, precious herbs, it was more abundant than other places. No matter what, they were the local tyrant of the border town. Even if they didn't take the people's wealth, they had accumulated a lot of these things. Handing over the visiting card, they also got the other party's reply. The next day, when old Madam He was preparing to go out, He Zhihai jumped out again. He firmly expressed that he also wanted to go to Qin Wang Fu. He Jinwei's veins popped out on his forehead. Everyone said that no one knows a son better than his father. Correspondingly, no one knows a father better than his son. How could He Zhihai not know what his father meant? Pa, it's me who bumped into Qin Wang Fei's carriage. I should apologize. Moreover, my injury is not completely healed. How can I fight with Qin Wang? I know that there won't be a good result. If I go up and get beaten up, wouldn't it delay the time to have a good fight? I'm not that stupid. He Jinwei was irritated by that, have a good fight. His hand was itchy and he wanted to slap someone. Alright, go. I don't allow you to go. Maybe you will secretly climb over the wall of Qin Wang Fu. Old Madam He said helplessly. https://11/11807/6654084. Chapter 373. Old Madam He keeps He high by her side to prevent him from making trouble when she doesn't pay attention to him. Today He Zhihai was well behaved. He did whatever his grandmother asked him to do. Perhaps because there was another man, Li Hongyuan accompanied her. When they met, old Madam He didn't hesitate to apologize. She didn't beat around the bush. She was straightforward. She was different from other women. Li Hongyuan played the role of a guest perfectly. Although Jingwan was in a high position, she respected those elders who didn't flaunt their seniority. Because she understood old Madam He, she had a good impression of her. She was wise, sensible, and righteous. In short, she deserved to be admired. Old Madam He could see who was the leader. She was a bit surprised, but she didn't ask anything. Old Madam He glanced at him and asked her son to apologize. It's okay if she didn't look at him. She looked at him and couldn't help but twitch her eyes. Her eyes were full of excitement. If she didn't know, she would think that she saw a beautiful woman and fell in love with her at first sight. Then she looked at him again. He was indeed beautiful, a top-notch beauty. But he was a real man, a real handsome man. Li Hongyuan was so handsome, but he didn't look feminine at all. When he was young, it was hard to distinguish whether he was a man or a woman. But since Li Hongyuan was 10 years old, he had a subtle and cruel influence. Those who used to make fun of him didn't have a good ending. Jingwan also saw He Zhihai's expression. But she didn't show any special expression. He was just a crazy fan. It's not like she didn't see it before. Well, because the person who was being fangirled was her husband, Jingwan still felt a little strange. Jingwan slightly tilted her head and glanced at Li Hongyuan. A certain someone was unperturbed, as if he didn't notice. Old madam, he felt itchy. If it wasn't because of the occasion, she would beat him up. Xiao Hai, hurry up and apologize to the princess consort. He Zhihai came back to his senses. He was a little bully and a scoundrel, but he also inherited the natural qualities of a man from a general's family. His apology to Jingwan was quite straightforward and sincere. Jingwan accepted it, but she didn't say anything more. The He family style was there. She believed that they had taught He Zhihai a lot, and he was still like a little tyrant. She couldn't just casually say a few words to him. However, as long as he wasn't really stubborn, she believed that after this battle, he would at least be restrained in the capital. Old madam, he doesn't stay for long. After all, it's a special time. Even with Lu Qingdi's imperial decree, she still needs to be cautious. Jingwan asked Mama Gong to send him out. Little gangster he, on the other hand, kept looking back as if he was reluctant to part with him. Jingwan looked at Li Hongyuan with a teasing expression. Wang Yi's charm is limitless. Even men will bend down for you, unable to extricate themselves. Whether other people bend or not, it has nothing to do with Ben Wang. Ben Wang only needs to bend down for Wan. Is this He family's little Gongzi counted as one of Wang Ye's flowers and plants? Do you want Xia to cut him off? Jingwan won't let go, her smile didn't change. Jing Qinwang used to be both men and women, so he didn't mind Jingwan's teasing. That's not necessary. As a husband, occasionally I should help my wife solve her worries. Wan, don't worry. No one can dream of your husband. The husband and wife teased each other for a while. After the joke was over, Jingwan asked Li Hongyuan about He Zhihai's matter. He's just obsessed with martial arts. He's excited to see you, Li Hongyuan replied lazily. Jingwan nodded. She understood immediately. Let's not talk about this matter for now. It's been 2 or 3 days. How is Wan reflecting on her mistake? Oh, this. Almost done. I'm preparing to clean it up. Li Hongyuan nodded. This husband will wait and see. Speaking of which, to clean up a certain someone's peach blossom, some preparations were still needed. Jingwan ordered for our Jin Qinwang Fu's steward to see her. Jin Qinwang Fei smilingly expressed that she needed to know all the details of the beauties in her husband's other courtyard. How big and small they were, how they came, what their identities were, etc. Mu Gonggong inexplicably trembled. That, although Master absolutely didn't do anything wrong to Wang Fei, but the existence of so many beauties was a fact. Wang Fei's smile didn't decrease, but it made people feel that her mood was quite subtle. It didn't seem like she was angry, but it definitely couldn't be said that she was happy. Was it really that after being with Wang Ye for a long time, Wang Fei also became terrifying? It was terrifying to the point that it was a bit different. When a person's joy and anger were completely expressed on their face, it was actually easier to bear. But a gentle fear was what people couldn't bear, right? Fortunately, after Mu Gonggong returned from the Luo family and met with an accident on the road, he had already made preparations. Now, whatever Wang Fei wanted, he could immediately take it out and organize it into a book. He was simply too considerate. Well done. Jingwan praised. Wang Fei, you flatter me. It's this servant's duty. Jingwan smiled and nodded. Mu An has always been loyal and devoted to Wang Ye. Since Mu An is so clear about these things, it must have been through your hands. You've worked hard. Mu An was still complacent before, but now he had a bitter expression. That, it might not be right to do things too perfectly. Now, he was simply lifting a stone to smash his own feet. In Wang Fei's eyes, he must have become the ultimate lackey, the culprit who searched for beauties for Wang Ye. Such a person, in the eyes of the female master, should be chopped into pieces. Mu An, this Wang Fei remembers your loyalty. Continue to work hard. Jingwan's smile didn't change. Mu An wailed in his heart, Wang Fei, please forget. https://11/11807/6654086. Chapter 374. In the following 2 to 3 days, the latest rumor in the capital was that Jin Qin Wang Fei was extremely jealous. The beauties in Jin Qin Wang's courtyard were either sent away, sold, or beaten to death by her. Not a single one was left. Even the courtyard where the beauties were kept was completely demolished. The things inside were all dismantled and sold, not a single one was left. All of this was enough to show how much Jin Qin Wang Fei hated the existence of those who had no one. Previously, there was a rumor that Jin Qin Wang Fei was jealous and could not tolerate people. Moreover, she was vicious and merciless. At that time, there might have been some doubts, but this time, it was really big. It was said that the beauties who were sent away were not dressed properly. It was said that the beauties who were sold were all tattooed with the word sin. It was said that the most miserable were the beauties who were beaten to death, crying and begging for mercy. They were so petty and pitiful that they could not beg Jin Qin Wang Fei to take pity on them. Not only were they beaten until their flesh was lacerated, they finally breathed their last. The beatings did not stop and they were turned into a pile of meat paste. The blood seeped into the ground and could not be washed away. It was not so bad, but Jin Qin Wang Fei actually sat on one side, eating while observing the punishment. That scene made one's hair stand up in anger. Even if it was the notorious Jin Qin Wang, compared to Jin Qin Wang Fei, it seemed that he had to retreat. Although Jin Qin Wang's name as the living king of hell was an indiscriminate and comprehensive suppression, Jin Qin Wang Fei only targeted the flowers and plants around Jin Qin Wang Fei. They could not be mentioned in the same breath. Jin Qin Wang Fei was not to the extent of making everyone fear her. However, it seemed that the world's attacks on her were even more aggressive. There were even people who requested the emperor to divorce such an evil woman. Such a person without virtue, not to mention being a daughter-in-law of the emperor, even ordinary families would divorce her and lock her up in the family temple. Those were all light punishments. The matter was far from over. As Jingwan's grandfather, Luo Rongyan, the Minister of Personnel, was also implicated. Logically speaking, Luo Rongyan should be the one to be directly attacked. However, Luo Rongyan was far from being qualified to sit in the imperial court. No matter how he was impeached, it wouldn't have much of an impact in the end. Thus, no one bothered to do that useless work. Ever since Luo Peishan became the minister of the Ministry of Personnel, he had been stubborn. No matter who tried to rope him in, he had offended everyone. At this time, naturally, no one would mention the Minister of Personnel's impartiality. However, even though he was impeached, Luo Shangshu appeared to be quite calm. According to him, his obedient granddaughter was filial to her elders before she got married. She loved her brothers and sisters, and was gentle and chaste. She was a good girl. As the saying goes, there are two sides of the same coin. If his granddaughter really did something wrong, it would be nothing more than that. His meaning could not be more obvious. If his young lady was not well, then it meant that she had changed places. It was a problem of water and soil. Everything was fine before she got married. If there was a problem after she got married, then it must be Jin Qin Wang Fu's problem. Furthermore, it was the imperial family's problem. It was them who led his young lady astray. How many people's faces turned green, including Lu Qingdi's face? It was a little. Well, actually, Lu Qingdi also knew what was going on. Because this matter had not happened yet, he already knew. It was because his family's evil spawn threw a tantrum in front of him in advance. This implied that there was something wrong with those women. Those brothers of his could not bear to see him doing well. They even brought up the matter in Jiangnan. For example, the 3 times he was plotted against, they were all related to them. He clearly did not fight for anything and did not want anything, but there were still people who were unwilling to let him go. Thus, it was better to let his mother take him with her when she died. In front of Lu Qingdi, Li Hongyuan took everything on himself in advance. The only one who could still pose a threat to Jingwan was Lu Qingdi. Lu Qingdi's weakness was grasped by Li Hongyuan. Once it involved his true love, his IQ dropped. In addition, there was some specious evidence in Li Hongyuan's hands, so he did not think about anything else. Everything was for his son. Therefore, after Jingwan did those things, Lu Qingdi's imagination filled in that his son was borrowing his daughter-in-law's hand to get rid of those unstable factors. The beauties in the other courtyard and so on were just a cover. The real people to get rid of were actually in the Wangfu. His daughter-in-law took the blame for his son. He had no choice but to be kind and really divorce her. Speaking of which, the imperial family did not seem to only divorce a woman. There was only the word sudden death. Moreover, with his son's quota of cursing his wife, if this daughter-in-law was gone, he might be a widower for life. Not only that, thinking about the abundant national treasury and the bulging private purse, there was also old sixth daughter-in-law's infamy. With all these, Lu Qingdi felt a little embarrassed when facing Luo Shangshu. Then, Lu Qingdi dismissed the memorial and said that he knew his daughter-in-law. She was not a malicious person. It must be those lowly people who angered her. What's more, what she said about being beaten to death was purely false. As the daughter-in-law of the imperial family, she represented the imperial family's face. Such wanton slander was slandering the imperial family. Whoever released the message, if he found out, he would definitely punish them severely. Then, the reward flowed like water into Jin Qin Wang Fu and was given to Jin Qin Wang Fei. Jingwan looked at the things that filled the courtyard and was speechless. What was that? Many of these things were embezzled by her from Jiangnan. As the monarch of a country, was he really so embarrassed? Moreover, she brought back tens of millions for him. These things were not even worth 100,000. So stingy. Waving her hand, she put them into the treasury. https://11/11807/6654088. Chapter 375. However, who on earth spread the news about what I did? She didn't know anything about it. Jingwan was only wearing a casual undergarment. Leaning against Li Hongyuan, she yawned lazily and twirled a strand of Li Hongyuan's hair with her fingers. Li Hongyuan was only wearing a single garment. He held her hand and kissed her fingertips. Does Wanwan mind? It doesn't matter. But obviously, someone is up to no good. Because of Li Hongyuan's sincerity and love, reputation really didn't matter. Don't worry. I'll take care of everything. Li Hongyuan lifted Jingwan's chin and lowered his head to kiss it. Li Hongyuan knew very well that as long as there was no other woman besides Wanwan by his side, no matter what he said, Wan would bear the name of a jealous woman. Although it was not impossible to get rid of it, it would take a long time at least to prove it. Only by letting people know his feelings for her and letting him be labeled as affectionate, and let people believe that it wasn't that Wan didn't want to be with him, but that it wasn't that he didn't want her. Only in this way could he wash away the stigma of Wan. It would take a few years, a decade, or even decades, because no one thought that a powerful and influential man would be faithful to a woman. In this way, Li Hongyuan naturally wouldn't be polite. He had to find some benefits from Jingwan. However, his sweetheart could be a jealous woman or a fierce woman, because she would definitely be removed in the future. But she couldn't be labeled as a vicious woman. If her hands were stained with blood and human lives, as long as it was determined now, it couldn't be washed away in the future. Li Hongyuan had a basic idea of the people behind the scenes. These people fell down again and again because they didn't know his role in it, so they had the courage to make trouble for him again and again. Jingwan turned sideways, hooked her arms around his neck, and exchanged a hot and lingering kiss with him. "Of course, I believe in you." Her forehead gently rubbed against Li Hongyuan's chin, incomparably intimate, and the scorching breath lingered. The husband and wife were calm, their servants were also calm, and those who knew the truth were also calm. However, there were more people who were not calm, especially after Lu Qingdi did not punish Qin Wang Fei and even gave her a large reward. They became even more unsettled, and some even became restless. The things that Qin Wang Fei could do, could they also do it? So, this was probably because she didn't know the inside story and didn't have Jingwan's life, so she wanted to have the same illness as her. Well, out of 100 people, at least 99 of them had this kind of illness. The rest were either stupid or had been severely brainwashed by the 3 obedience and 4 virtues. They were all sick, but only Qin Wang Fei could valiantly show it. The others couldn't, so one could imagine the feeling in their hearts. Because of Jingwan, the Luo family was greatly affected, including the 2 cousins. Of course, Luo Peishan was still sitting in the position of Minister of Personnel. Even if the 2 in-laws had thoughts, they wouldn't show it. Furthermore, the 2 didn't do anything to their husbands' concubines and Tongfang. Qin Wang Fei's time in the capital was also very short. When she first arrived in the capital, Luo Jingshu was already married and had a child. Luo Jingqiang also married not long after, so it didn't affect them. Don't forget, a few days ago, Jingwan also sent a large number of things to the 2 families. Nominally, it was the children's 3 baptisms and full moon gifts. However, other than what was designated for the 2 children, there were many other things. Some of these things, people like them simply couldn't afford to use. As daughters-in-law, Luo Jingshu and Luo Jingqiang weren't stingy with their in-laws' families. No matter what, there was no reason to make things difficult for them. After thinking about it, the one who was affected the most was still Jingwan's concubine-born sister, Luo Jingyu. She was only 1 year younger than Jingwan. Even though she was a concubine-born daughter, she had a grandfather who was the Minister of Personnel and a legitimate sister who was a Qin Wang Fei. Naturally, she could be considered a fragrant piece of cake. Many people wanted to marry her, and many people wanted to marry their legitimate sons. Even though it wasn't the eldest legitimate son, it was enough to show their sincerity. When Jingwan's matter came out, many people retreated. Thus, as Luo Jingyu's birth mother, Ji Yinyang, was anxious. Originally, there were many outstanding men with good family backgrounds for her daughter to choose from, but now, Luo Jingyu herself was very calm. Originally, she was a little dull and timid, but Sun Yijia, her eldest sister-in-law, helped her to adjust. She had always followed Jingwan's lead, so she was very open-minded about this matter. "Concubine, you don't have to worry. Anyway, I'm still young, so I can wait for another 2 years." Besides, I don't think that third sister's matter is a bad influence. 10 out of 10 people who want to marry me want to get benefits from the Luo family, so they should have the awareness of marrying a jealous woman back home. After all, I have the capital, don't I? If I want to have a woman on my left and right, and if I want to get a lot of benefits from my wife's family, how can there be such an easy thing? A truly ambitious man will not put too much thought into the harem, so naturally, he will be relatively indifferent to women. In my case, it's purely a marriage of benefits, and for the sake of the future, such a man is the best choice. Moreover, this matter is obviously strange. We all know what kind of person third sister is. Although she doesn't like concubines, even if she wants to deal with those women, she will definitely do such a vicious thing. Just look at grandmother and the others. Who knows, in a few days, it will be completely different. Thus, Enyang, you can rest assured that my marriage will not go wrong. Who knows, I might be able to choose the best one. When Ji Enyang heard this, it seemed that this was the truth. Her heart gradually calmed down. However, when she looked at her eldest daughter again, she had a new level of respect for her. Was she really that dull and timid child? Luo Jingyu looked at her Enyang and smiled. She lowered her head and continued to embroider. Third sister-in-law not only sent people to teach me, but also brought me here from time to time. If I don't make any progress, wouldn't I be letting down third sister's good intentions? What does this have to do with your third sister? Luo Jingyu raised her head again and looked at her Enyang with a strange expression. If third sister didn't ask third sister-in-law, do you think third sister-in-law would pay attention to me? Ji Enyang's face was somewhat flustered. She really was muddle-headed. However, she wasn't anxious at all. She was too lazy to care about this daughter. Serving Furen was the most important thing. Other than Jingwan, who was at the center of the vortex, the other person who received the most attention was probably Li Hongyuan. Although Jin Qinwang had spoiled those women in the past and completely did not touch them, but he had always spent money to support them. Now, all of them were dealt with by Jin Qinwang Fei. To a certain extent, it was undoubtedly 2 slaps on the face. It was simply trampling his dignity on the ground. His face was completely lost and no man could tolerate it. Thus, he was caught by his brothers and laughed at. https://11/11807/6654091. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.